Have you ever experienced something so impossible that it shattered everything you believed about life, faith, and God? I did. For more than 20 years, I stood before hundreds of worshippers as an imam. People respected me. Families sought my advice. Young men wanted to learn from me. I knew the Quran by heart. I studied theology for years. I believed I had found the truth, and I spent my life teaching it to others. But one night, something happened that I still struggle to explain. I opened my mouth to pray, and words came out that I had never learned. Words that sounded like no language I recognized. Words that terrified me. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Then I discovered those strange words would lead me on a journey that would completely change my understanding of Jesus forever. What I'm about to share changed my life, cost me nearly everything, and brought me face to face with questions I had spent years trying to avoid. My name is Hassan, and this is my story. I was born into a deeply religious family. Faith was not merely something we practiced. Faith was the foundation of our identity. My grandfather had been respected throughout our region for his religious knowledge. My father was known for his devotion and discipline. From childhood, I was taught that obedience to God was life's highest purpose. Every morning before sunrise, my father would wake me for prayer. While other children slept, I sat beside him learning sacred texts. I loved it. I loved the structure. I loved the certainty. I loved knowing exactly what was expected of me. By the age of 12, many people in our community already believed I would become a religious leader. By 16, I was studying under respected scholars. By 25, I had become an imam. I felt honored. I felt chosen. Most importantly, I felt certain. There was only one problem. Questions. Questions that I never dared ask publicly. Questions that appeared late at night when nobody else was around. Questions about forgiveness. Questions about assurance. Questions about whether I could ever truly know that God accepted me. Whenever those thoughts appeared, I pushed them away. I told myself that doubt was weakness. I told myself that discipline would silence uncertainty. But uncertainty has a way of surviving. Years passed. I married. I became known in my community. People traveled long distances to hear me teach. Outwardly, everything looked successful. Inwardly, something was missing. Then came the dreams. The first dream seemed insignificant. I saw a bright light in the distance. Standing within the light was a man wearing white. His face was difficult to see. Yet somehow I felt overwhelming peace. The figure looked directly at me and spoke only 4 words. "Come and follow me." I woke up immediately. My heart raced. I dismissed it. People have strange dreams all the time. I ignored it and continued with life. But the dreams returned. Again and again. Sometimes the same figure appeared. Sometimes I heard only a voice. Sometimes I saw nothing except light. Yet the message remained remarkably similar. Do not be afraid. Seek the truth. Come to me. The dreams disturbed me. I refused to tell anyone. As an imam, I knew how such stories would sound. So I kept everything hidden. Months later, something happened that frightened me even more than the dreams. I was alone in the mosque after evening prayer. The building was silent. Everyone had gone home. I remained behind to pray. As I knelt, I began reciting familiar prayers. Then suddenly I felt an overwhelming sensation unlike anything I had experienced before. It felt as though a powerful presence had entered the room. I opened my eyes. Nobody was there. Yet the feeling remained. My heart pounded. I tried to continue praying. Then my lips began moving. At first I thought I was speaking Arabic. But these were not Arabic words. They flowed rapidly. Sentence after sentence. Language after language. Sounds I had never heard before. I tried to stop. I couldn't. Fear surged through my body. I stood up abruptly. The words continued. Tears filled my eyes. For nearly 20 minutes, I spoke in this unknown language. Then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The room became silent. I stared at the floor in shock. What just happened to me? 4 days, I told nobody. I feared I was becoming mentally unstable. I feared I was under spiritual attack. I feared many things. But deep inside, another possibility haunted me. What if God was trying to show me something? I spent weeks researching spiritual experiences. Nothing seemed to fit. Then one afternoon I came across a video online. A Christian pastor was speaking about something called speaking in tongues. I almost clicked away immediately. But curiosity stopped me. As I listened, chills ran through my body. The descriptions sounded remarkably similar to what I had experienced. I was disturbed. Why would my experience resemble something associated with Christianity? I closed the video. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. For the first time in my life, I began reading portions of the Bible, not to believe it, but to understand what I had experienced. I expected confusion. Instead, I found something unexpected. I found Jesus. Not the Jesus I had always been taught about. Not merely a prophet. Not merely a messenger. But a Savior who spoke about forgiveness, grace, and a personal relationship with God. His words affected me deeply. Especially one statement. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest. That word pierced my heart. Because despite all my years of religious dedication, rest was exactly what I lacked. I had discipline. I had knowledge. I had reputation. But I did not have peace. The more I read, the harder it became to dismiss Jesus. His teachings challenged me. His compassion moved me. His authority unsettled me. And then the dreams returned. This time the man in white stood closer. For the first time, I clearly saw his face. He looked at me with compassion unlike anything I had ever experienced. Then he spoke. Hassan, why are you afraid of the truth? I woke up trembling. That night, for the first time in my life, I prayed a different prayer. I did not pray as an imam. I did not pray as a teacher. I prayed as a desperate man seeking answers. God, if Jesus is truly who he claimed to be, show me. What happened next changed everything. That night, after praying those words, I expected nothing to happen. I had asked God a simple question. If Jesus is truly who he claimed to be, show me. Then I went to bed convinced that by morning I would return to normal life. I was wrong. The next several weeks became the most confusing period of my entire life. Every day I continued performing my duties as an imam. I led prayers. I taught students. I met with families. I delivered sermons. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inwardly, everything was changing. The questions I had spent years suppressing now demanded answers. I found myself thinking about Jesus constantly. His words echoed in my mind while I was teaching. His teachings surfaced during prayer. Even when I tried to focus on other things, I could not escape them. I became frustrated. I told myself I was allowing curiosity to distract me. I needed to focus on my responsibilities. I needed to stop reading the Bible. I needed to stop thinking about Jesus. But every attempt to push him away only seemed to draw my attention back. One evening, after everyone had left the mosque, I sat alone in my office. The room was quiet except for the sound of a ceiling fan turning slowly above me. I opened a drawer and pulled out the small Bible I had secretly purchased weeks earlier. Even holding it made me nervous. If anyone discovered it, questions would immediately follow. An imam reading the Bible? People would not understand. Perhaps I didn't understand it myself. I opened to the Gospel of John. My eyes fell upon words I had never noticed before. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I read the passage again, and again, then again. Something about it captivated me. As I continued reading, I encountered a Jesus unlike the image I had carried for most of my life. He wasn't merely teaching people how to behave. He wasn't merely performing miracles. He was making astonishing claims about himself. Claims that demanded a response. Either he was telling the truth, or he was not. There seemed to be no middle ground. I closed the Bible and leaned back in my chair. My heart felt heavy, because for the first time, I realized I was no longer examining Christianity as a scholar. I was examining it as a seeker, and that frightened me. Very few people knew the internal battle I was fighting. In fact, there was only one person who began to notice. My wife. She could see the exhaustion in my eyes. She could hear it in my voice. One evening she placed a cup of tea in front of me and quietly sat beside me. "You've changed," she said. I forced a smile. "What do you mean?" "You seem troubled." "I'm just tired." She studied me carefully. After years of marriage, she knew when I wasn't telling the whole truth. But thankfully, she did not press further. At least not then. That night, I slept poorly. Near dawn, I had another dream. This dream felt different. More vivid. More real. I found myself standing in a vast desert. The sky above was dark. A powerful wind blew across the sand. In the distance, I saw a man walking toward me. As he approached, I recognized him immediately. The same figure from my previous dreams. The man in white. This time he carried a lantern. When he reached me, he extended the lantern toward me. The light illuminated everything around us. Then he spoke. "Truth is not afraid of investigation." I stared at him. Before I could respond, he continued. "If you seek with all your heart, you will find." The dream ended instantly. I woke up sitting upright in bed. My heart raced. The words remained clear in my mind. Truth is not afraid of investigation. I could not stop thinking about them. The following morning, I made a decision. If I truly believed that God was the source of truth, then I should not fear asking difficult questions. I should not fear examining evidence. I should not fear wherever the truth might lead. That decision launched me into months of study. Every spare moment became an opportunity to research. I compared texts. I read historical sources. I studied theological arguments. I analyzed beliefs I had accepted for decades. At first, I expected my investigations to strengthen my existing convictions. Instead, they challenged them. Some questions became impossible to ignore. Why did Jesus speak with such unique authority? Why did his followers remain loyal even under persecution? Why were so many people throughout history willing to suffer and die rather than deny him? Most importantly, why did I feel such overwhelming peace whenever I read his words? That question troubled me the most. Because peace was not something I could explain academically. It was something I was experiencing personally. Then came another incident I could not ignore. One Friday evening, after a long day of ministry, I returned home exhausted. I sat alone in our living room. The house was silent. My wife had gone to visit relatives. I was completely alone. Without thinking, I opened the Bible again. I began reading the Sermon on the Mount. As I read, an unusual sense of warmth filled the room. I looked around. Nothing seemed different. Yet the atmosphere felt strangely alive. I continued reading. Then suddenly tears began flowing down my face. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of fear. Tears of overwhelming conviction. For years I had taught people about obedience to God. But at that moment, I became painfully aware of my own pride. I realized how much of my identity depended on being respected, being knowledgeable, being admired, being seen as spiritually mature. The realization crushed me. For nearly an hour I sat there weeping. No audience, no congregation, no public image to protect. Just me and God. When I finally stood up, I felt lighter, yet more confused than ever, because everything I was experiencing seemed to point in one direction. Toward Jesus. Toward questions I was increasingly unable to avoid. Several days later, something happened that shook me even more deeply. I was visiting a nearby town to attend a community event. During a break, an elderly man approached me. I had never seen him before. He looked at me with unusual intensity. Then he asked a simple question. "Are you searching for something?" I was surprised. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "The look in your eyes." I laughed nervously. "I'm not searching for anything." The man continued smiling. Then he said words I will never forget. Sometimes God begins answering a person's questions before they realize they are asking them. A chill ran down my spine. I had never spoken to this man. He knew nothing about my situation. Yet his words felt directed specifically at me. Before I could respond, someone called him away. Within moments he disappeared into the crowd. I never saw him again. That encounter stayed with me for weeks. The more I reflected on it, the more I sensed that God was guiding me toward something. Toward an answer. Toward a revelation. Toward a truth I had not yet fully understood. Then came the night that changed everything. A night I can still remember in vivid detail. The mosque was empty. Rain fell outside. Thunder echoed across the sky. I had remained behind after evening prayers. The building felt unusually quiet. I sat alone in the prayer hall. The lights were dim. The atmosphere felt solemn. I bowed my head and prayed. Not a formal prayer. Not a memorized prayer. A sincere prayer from the depths of my heart. God, I need clarity. My voice trembled. I cannot continue living between certainty and doubt. Silence filled the room. Then something happened. A peace unlike anything I had ever experienced settled over me. It was impossible to describe. Not emotional excitement. Not fear. Not imagination. Peace. Deep. Powerful. Unshakable. For several minutes, I sat motionless. Then the familiar sensation returned. The same sensation I had experienced weeks earlier. The overwhelming presence. The awareness that something beyond my understanding was taking place. My heart pounded. I knew what had happened before. I knew what might happen again. Suddenly, words began flowing from my lips. The unknown language returned. Stronger than before. Longer than before. More powerful than before. I spoke continuously. Tears streamed down my face. This time, however, something was different. I was not afraid. For the first time, I felt overwhelming peace while it was happening. And then, in the midst of those strange words, a thought entered my mind with extraordinary clarity. Not an audible voice. Not a dream. A certainty. A message impressed upon my heart. Do not fear where truth leads. The words struck me with tremendous force. When the experience finally ended, I remained seated on the floor, breathing heavily, staring into the darkness. One realization had become impossible to escape. Whatever was happening to me, God was involved. And whatever God was doing, it was leading me toward Jesus. What I did not know was that the greatest challenge was still ahead. Because soon, my secret investigation would no longer remain secret. And when the people closest to me discovered what I had been studying, my entire world would begin to unravel. The moment I had feared for months finally arrived. And it happened in the simplest way imaginable. One afternoon, I returned home earlier than expected. As I entered the house, I noticed my wife sitting quietly in the living room. There was an unusual expression on her face. Concern, confusion, and something else. Fear. My heart sank immediately. On the table beside her sat the small Bible I had hidden. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The room felt frozen. I slowly sat down across from her. She looked at the Bible. Then she looked at me. "What is this?" she asked softly. I had prepared myself for many difficult conversations. Yet somehow I was completely unprepared for this one. I took a deep breath. "I can explain." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then explain." And so I did. For the next 2 hours, I shared everything. The dreams, the questions, the strange experiences, the growing curiosity about Jesus, the nights spent studying, the internal struggle, everything. When I finished, silence filled the room. My wife stared at the floor. Then she whispered something that broke my heart. "I don't recognize you anymore." Those words cut deeper than any criticism. Because I understood her fear. For years she had known exactly who I was. Now even I wasn't sure. Days passed. The atmosphere in our home became tense. My wife loved me. I loved her. But we stood on opposite sides of a question neither of us knew how to answer. Then the rumors began. Somehow word spread that I had been studying Christianity. At first I dismissed it. Rumors come and go. But these rumors did not disappear. They grew. People began asking strange questions. Students became cautious around me. Friends seemed distant. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. I knew what was happening. People were watching, waiting, trying to determine whether the stories were true. One evening, several respected leaders requested a private meeting. I knew immediately why. The meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. Question after question came. Are the rumors true? Have you been reading Christian materials? Do you still believe what you teach? Their voices remained calm. But beneath their questions, I sensed growing concern. I answered honestly. Perhaps more honestly than I should have. I am searching. The room became silent. One leader leaned forward. What exactly are you searching for? I paused. Then I said the words that changed everything. I am searching for truth. The meeting ended shortly afterward. And from that day forward, nothing was the same. My responsibilities were gradually reduced. Invitations stopped coming. People who once sought my advice avoided me. The respect I had spent decades building began disappearing. At first I felt anger, then grief, then fear. Because I realized the cost of this journey might be much greater than I imagined. One night I stood alone in the mosque after everyone had left. I looked around the prayer hall, the walls, the carpets, the place where I had spent years teaching and leading. A painful question entered my mind. What if I lose everything? For the first time, I truly understood what fear felt like. Not fear of physical harm. Fear of losing identity, community, purpose, family, everything familiar. I fell to my knees, and I prayed, God, if you are leading me, give me courage. The answer did not come immediately, but it was coming. And it would arrive in a way I never expected. Several weeks after that meeting, I reached a breaking point. I could no longer live in uncertainty. The questions had become too important. The evidence too compelling. The experiences too powerful. I needed an answer. One evening I traveled outside the city to spend time alone. I found a quiet place overlooking open fields. The sun was setting. The sky glowed orange and gold. For hours I sat there praying. As darkness fell, I spoke honestly to God, perhaps more honestly than ever before. I don't care about tradition anymore. My voice trembled. I don't care about reputation. Tears filled my eyes. I only want the truth. Then I said something that terrified me. If Jesus is truly the way to you, I will follow him no matter the cost. The moment those words left my lips, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Not excitement. Not emotion. Peace. The same peace that had accompanied so many of my encounters. As darkness surrounded me, I opened the Bible one final time. My eyes fell upon a passage I had read before. But this time it felt different. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I stared at the words, again and again. The way, the truth, the life. Suddenly all the pieces began fitting together. The dreams, the questions, the peace, the strange language, the longing in my heart, the search. Everything pointed to one person, Jesus. At that moment something changed inside me. Not merely my beliefs, my heart. For years I had been striving, trying harder, working harder, performing better. Yet I had never truly known peace. Now peace stood before me as a gift I could never earn, only receive. I bowed my head. Tears streamed down my face. And for the first time in my life, I prayed to Jesus. Not as a prophet, not as a historical figure, but as Savior. Jesus, I whispered, if you are who you claim to be, I surrender my life to you. The words felt both terrifying and liberating. I expected lightning, thunder, some dramatic sign. None came. Instead, I experienced something far more powerful. Peace. A peace deeper than anything I had ever known. A peace that reached places inside me I didn't know existed. For the first time in my life, I felt completely forgiven, completely known, completely loved. I remained there for hours, worshiping, praying, weeping, thanking God. When I finally stood, I knew my life would never be the same. The journey that began with questions had ended with an answer. But another journey was about to begin. And this one would cost me more than I ever imagined. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. People noticed the change immediately. I could not hide it. The fear that once controlled me had disappeared. The restlessness that haunted me was gone. The uncertainty had been replaced with conviction. Eventually, I shared my decision with my wife. It was one of the most difficult conversations I have ever had. She cried. I cried. Neither of us knew what the future would hold. For a time, our relationship became strained. Painfully strained. Yet even in those difficult moments, I sensed God's presence. Months later, many of my former colleagues learned about my decision. Some reacted with anger. Others with disappointment. A few simply walked away. Phone calls stopped. Friendships ended. Doors closed. The cost became real. There were nights when I sat alone wondering whether I had destroyed my entire life. Yet every time doubt tried to return, I remembered the peace. The peace I had found in Jesus. The peace I had searched for all those years. And every time, I knew I could never go back. Because truth had become more valuable than comfort. Over time, God began rebuilding what had been lost. Not necessarily in the way I expected, but in ways I desperately needed. I found new believers who welcomed me, people who cared about me, people who prayed with me, people who helped me grow. Most importantly, I discovered a relationship with God unlike anything I had previously experienced. No longer was faith merely a set of duties. Faith became relationship, conversation, trust, love. Years have passed since those events. Today, when I look back on my journey, one truth stands above everything else. God was pursuing me long before I realized I was searching for Him. Even when I resisted, even when I doubted, even when I was afraid, He never stopped calling. Sometimes people ask me what convinced me. Was it the dreams, the research, the experiences, the strange language? I always give the same answer. Those things opened the door. But Jesus Himself convinced me. His words, His love, His peace, His presence. That is what changed my life. If you are listening to my story right now and you find yourself asking difficult questions, do not fear them. Truth is never threatened by honest searching. Seek sincerely. Ask honestly. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. Because that is exactly what I did. I began as an imam convinced I already possessed every answer. Yet my search led me somewhere I never expected. It led me to Jesus. And in Him, I found what my heart had been searching for all along. Peace, forgiveness, hope, and a truth worth giving everything for. If my story has touched your heart, remember this. Sometimes the journey to truth begins with a single question. For me, it began with a strange language I had never learned. For you, it may begin somewhere else. But if you seek God with sincerity, do not be surprised if He answers in ways you never expected. Because that is exactly what happened to me. And that is why I will spend the rest of my life telling this story. The story of how an imam searching for answers found Jesus.